Here on Wham Baam Dashcam, we've shown you over 1,000 dashcam videos sent in by our fans, and we serve up 20 new ones every week. Today we're showcasing some of the craziest clips we've ever featured, so buckle up for Wham Baam Dashcam's Worst Drivers of Washington, Volume 1. Tyler was on his way home when a Mazda driver entering the highway failed to yield and sideswiped his Ford Fiesta. Both drivers stopped and exchanged information before Tyler continued on his way home. He also pointed out that the other driver hadn't been using his turn signal at the time of the collision. Sean was on his way back to Seattle and pulled over to check his phone for a good place to eat. As he pulled into a mostly empty parking lot, an elderly driver didn't see him entering and began backing up. When Sean honked, the driver of the Toyota Camry initially stopped, but then he seemed to floor it in reverse, backing directly into Sean's brand new Audi Q7. The man accepted fault and gave Sean his insurance information. The estimate to repair the damage came to $5,000 US. D-Nice, was driving home from work when she watched a wheel come off the trailer in front of her on the interstate. D-Nice was able to brake in time to avoid getting hit by the wayward wheel while the driver pulled over. She sent along a shout out for her daughter Courtney, who loves watching our videos. Muhammad was leaving a parking lot when another driver made a U-turn as he was trying to go around her. Both drivers pulled over and exchanged information, and Muhammad told us he's now working through the insurance claim process. This submitter was approaching a construction zone when the driver ahead of him got impatient and decided to drive against a flagger's stop sign. The flagger did his best to block the driver's path, but they continued, forcing him to jump out of the way. Our submitter gave the flagger a copy of his dashcam video in case he or his employer want to file charges. I'm surprised that flagger didn't deposit his stop sign into that driver's windshield. If you'd been that flagger, what would you have done? Let us know in the comments. Ryan was on his way to work when he watched the driver of a pickup truck run a red light right in front of him. Ryan hit the brakes as soon as he noticed the pickup wasn't stopping, but the driver of the Jeep in the lane next to him wasn't as aware and got T-boned. Ryan pulled over and gave both drivers his business card in case either of them wanted his dashcam footage for their insurance claims. Evidently they didn't because he never heard from them. Riley was merging right when a red SUV that had just left that lane started drifting back. Riley jerked the steering wheel to avoid a collision, causing her Subaru Forester to lose control and spin into the highway barrier. The Subaru was totaled by the impact, and her insurance provider cut her a check for $5,800 US. John was on his way home from work when the driver of a blue pickup that had been tailgating him and others got tired of waiting for one semi-truck to pass another. That's why you don't try to pass a semi on the right, kids. The pickup driver was forced to the shoulder as the semi-driver merged back over, evidently unable to see the pickup. Thankfully, no collision occurred. John told us he was inspired by our channel to buy his dashcam 2 months ago. He's glad his first submission didn't involve any collisions or injuries. Rudy was driving in Bellevue, Washington when he watched a Kia Soul driver turn across traffic and get hit by a pickup truck. The impact ripped off the Kia's rear bumper cover and damaged the driver's quarter panel. Rudy had to continue to get to a meeting, but it doesn't look like anyone was injured. He told us he'd been wanting to get a dashcam for a while, and he captured this video 2 weeks after getting one. He also wanted to shout out his girlfriend, Denise. Sebastian is a tow truck driver who was on his way to pick up a stolen Hyundai for the Washington State Patrol. As he arrived on the scene, he activated his overhead hazard lights, but that wasn't enough for the driver behind him. The driver of a Saturn Ion ran into Sebastian's tow truck, then backed up and ran into another car in reverse. Of course, the state trooper witnessed the whole thing before giving the Saturn driver a citation. Because the tow truck was considered an emergency vehicle in a work zone, the Saturn driver's ticket was immediately doubled and ineligible to be waived or reduced. Thankfully, the tow truck was only barely affected by the impact. This emitter was stuck in off-ramp traffic when he spotted a driver who'd missed their exit backing down the shoulder to escape traffic. Well, that's one way to get out of traffic, one we do not recommend. Our submitter asked us to shout out his wife, Tina. Hyra was getting ready to make a right turn onto a main road using a turn lane with a yield sign. When he stopped for cross traffic, he got Honda bumped. Hyra has some kind of crazy 4-channel dashcam system in his Lincoln Town Car, and he captured footage of the collision from a total of 6 angles, if you also count his 2-channel dashcam mounted to the windshield. He wanted to point out that his camera system has better colors than Tesla's cameras do. That might have been true when he sent this to us, but Tesla recently pushed a software update to improve their cameras. Can his do that? Seriously though, that's an awesome setup. If you're shopping for a dashcam, remember, the more angles, the better. Adrian was going downtown to go to work when a city bus began merging into his lane after leaving that lane only moments earlier. Adrian considers himself lucky that he had space to the right to avoid a collision. He told us he sent a complaint to the city, but they never contacted him. He also told us our videos were the main reason he got a dashcam in the first place. If you're a fan, hit that subscribe button. It's free. Riley had just merged onto the interstate when traffic suddenly slowed way down. When she heard a crash from behind, she tried to avoid being rear-ended by a Fiat headed toward her, but there was nothing she could do. Whoa. The Fiat had been rear-ended by a silver Audi, which was the crash she'd heard, and pushed into Riley's Volvo before the Audi driver sped off, with steam coming from under the hood. Riley gave her dashcam footage to the police when they responded, but then the Audi driver returned and was apprehended. The cops told Riley the Audi driver was intoxicated and uninsured. Riley made a claim with her own insurance provider, but chose not to replace the bumper cover as she parks her Volvo on the street where she figures it's probably going to get bumped into anyway. Crystal was driving when she watched the car ahead of her lose control on a wet off-ramp and go spinning off the road. Kristen wasn't able to stick around to see if the driver could get unstuck, but she told us it was clear they hadn't been injured. This emitter was driving down a highway at about 1 a.m. when he watched a trucker almost continue into a concrete barrier as the highway started to curve. We don't know if the trucker was distracted or sleepy, but either way, we're glad he avoided that collision. Remember, if you're tired, stop and rest. No matter what's on the line, it's not worth more than your life. Corey was driving in Vancouver and had ended up behind an oversized load, a single wind turbine blade strapped to a trailer. Watch what happened when the truck had to take a turn. The tip of the blade struck multiple trees, damaging it. Corey told us he works next to the blade's destination and often talks to the people who unload them, and he found out the blade had to be sent back to the manufacturer. Johnny was driving in Seattle when he noticed the driver ahead of him slowing down. Suddenly, the driver jerked the steering wheel to the left, slamming into the side of a Prius in the neighboring lane. Johnny stopped and gave a copy of his footage to the Prius driver. He wanted to shout out his girlfriend Karen and told us he was inspired by the Wham Bam channels to get a dashcam just a few months before this happened. Max was waiting for traffic to proceed through a single-lane construction zone when impatient drivers behind him decided it would be a good idea to drive through an oncoming turn lane to skip the wait. Sadly for them, an oncoming driver needed to use that turn lane, and he was not happy about the illegal use of his lane by the entitled drivers. Max even put his arm out his window to signal to the other drivers not to continue, but he was ignored. He said that if the front car had been headed off a cliff, the Seattle area would now have fewer bad drivers. Todd really wanted us to call his wife person throughout this next video. She was driving her Honda CR-V when traffic ahead of her came to a sudden stop, but the van driver behind her didn't notice in time. Todd's wife person pulled over, as did the van and the pickup. When the Washington State Patrol responded, she showed her dashcam footage to the trooper and he cited the van driver for driving too fast for conditions. After paying over $7,000 to fix the CR-V, the van driver's insurance provider offered an insulting amount to settle its diminished value. So Todd filed a lawsuit, which was settled 2 days before going to trial. After replacing the CR-V with a Honda Passport, Todd's wife person used the rest of the settlement to buy new shoes, a purse, more shoes, another purse, and a new summer outfit to match the shoes and the purse. Robbie was driving his Volkswagen Jetta when his traffic light gave him a green arrow, indicating he had a protected left turn and that oncoming traffic had a red light. Well, one driver didn't seem to care. An oncoming driver blew through his red light before giving Robbie a dirty look, as if he was the one at fault. Robbie shouted for the other driver to look at the light before they both continued on. John was driving his Jeep Wrangler on a typically rainy day in the Pacific Northwest. As he approached a four-way stop, he watched a white Toyota Camry speed through the stop sign on his left before T-boning an oncoming minivan. John told us this is unfortunately a common occurrence. He stopped to check on the drivers before calling 911. When the police arrived, he provided his dashcam footage to the responding officers as well as to the driver of the minivan. John told us he owns a dashcam because of the Wham Bam channels. Awesome! If you need a dashcam for your vehicle, you'll find links to our recommendations in the video description as well as coupon codes just for our fans. Our next video comes from Medical Lake, Washington, which happens to be where my wife and I go to church. We've literally driven through this exact roundabout dozens of times. Anyway, Mark had just accelerated to the speed limit of 55 miles per hour when the driver of a Ford Taurus turned across the road in front of him, forcing him to slam on the brakes. Mark told us he gave her a good long honk of the horn, but since the only harm done was to his heart, he kept on going. Thanks for the video, Mark. Taylor called 911 to report what he believed was an intoxicated Civic driver. Shortly after he led a state trooper in front of him to follow the Civic, Taylor watched it drift off the road and into a parked vehicle. A drunk driver, a Honda bump, and instant justice? This might be the most wham bam of wham bam moments. Well, it would be, except the Civic driver passed a breathalyzer test. He wasn't drunk and claimed he'd just fallen asleep. Incredibly, the collision ended up involving 4 vehicles in total. The Civic clipped a black VW sedan, then slammed into a Dodge SUV and pushed it into a Ford Focus, which isn't visible in the dashcam footage. Taylor stuck around to give out copies of his footage. He also told us that 2 weeks later, the Civic was still parked in the same place on the side of the road. This submitter was heading home with his wife from IKEA when they had an opportunity to take a dangerous driver off the road, at least for a while. When they spotted a pickup truck struggling to hold its lane, they called 911.
I am reporting an impaired driver in a Dodge pickup truck, light colored beige with a roof rack.
The emergency operator asked them to continue following the pickup from a safe distance while troopers from the Washington State Patrol were quickly dispatched to the area. 10 minutes later, 2 State Patrol SUVs had arrived. It took a couple of minutes for the troopers to figure out which pickup they'd called about, but eventually they pulled it over to find out if the driver was intoxicated.
We're just now passing them. The truck directly in front of us in the third lane is the one that was swerving. And the officer is right there and getting right behind.
Our submitter doesn't know if the pickup driver was impaired, but at the very least, they probably got a very stern lecture from the state troopers. Good work, Deckmaster. Your actions may very well have saved lives.
Wham! Bam, we got a Patreon, man. Please support the show.